Hello everyone, and welcome to Wrath of Minis. Brianna and Kaan here, and we are going to share with you guys 4 tips that after Cycle 1 of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, we have learned through the process of playing this game to make our lives easier that we wanted to share with you guys to make the experience even more immersive, and so you can just sit back and have fun a little bit more, because that is sometimes a challenge with these really big campaign-style games. One of the tips is going to be Kaan's box organization, which is very important when you have so many different little elements. Stay tuned for that toward the end. But yeah, we've got 4 tips for you guys and one kind of bonus tip as well.
Right.
So let's get into it.
Let's do it. After defeating the Labyrintharos, I pulled out this Minoan artifact, obviously out of its gullet hole, and now it's here upon adorning my table. For the first tip, the tip is about record keeping. In this game, there is a ton of things to keep track of. It's a big game. It wants you to record stuff. And in the game, you have to record, well, practically everything. If it's not your Argonauts, it's going to be the timeline, it's going to be your cargo, it's going to be the adventure track. There's a ton of stuff to record and manage. And it can all be done on this sheet, back to front, or on the Argonauts and things like that. But it works, obviously, but it's so much easier if you just use the app.
Now, the app is developed by Into the Unknown Studios, the developer of the game. Is that correct?
Yep.
And it didn't cost any money?
Cost no money.
You know, it's definitely worth taking a look. Like, some people might like the aesthetics of, like, record keeping on a sheet of paper. And, you know, the app itself there's a lot of, like, little sub-menus that you have to get into, so you have to learn how to use it. So it's not like, you know, it's not perfect, and you may prefer the paper and pencil, but the game itself is really a table hog, like a lot of these games are.
Yeah.
So just having multiple sheets that you have to pull out, it's easier when it's on your phone. You don't have to keep track of those sheets, possibly misplace them. Usually you have your phone with you. It looks great. It's easy to use. It's pretty intuitive. It kind of pulls the experience together and makes it a little bit easier. You know, it's definitely worth taking a look because it's free.
Yeah.
Okay, tip number 2 is getting the printout. There's a fan. His name is Peter from the Esoteric Order of Games. He has created, great name, a very, I think it's an 8-page distillation of the rules. It's like a quick reference guide, has all of the icons, allows you to very quickly find rules that you may be looking for. It's just a printout that you can find on Board Game Geek, and we will have the link in our description below. But Kaan, why do you like it?
Well, firstly, this game's got a rule book that's like 70-something pages. And flicking through all of that all the time can be a bit annoying, a little tricky. And if you've got multiple people playing, you might need to have the rule book open on a certain page, but you also need access to another thing. And so it's really useful having just some of the key information available as a handout. Because the more you play the game, obviously you learn a lot of the major functions, you know how to operate the game, and you go through the procedures that are. However, because the game is so big, there are lots of little things that it's difficult to be aware of at all times. And there are things you can just forget. So something that I found that was really useful with just having these reference sheets, papers about, was just some of the keywords. But instead of going to the rule book, we would just have the sheets available, and then we could quickly look at them whilst we were playing. And that was just a neat little thing to have. Another thing that I found that was really useful was the escalation chart. So the escalation chart in the game is every time that you wound a primordial, you will change out the BP card and the AI card for a level higher than. And for the most part, that's pretty straightforward, except that the AI and the BP card are slightly different depending on not only was it a critical wound or the level that it was, but one of them requires you not to take one out, and the other one takes you to pull one out and put one back in. And it's straightforward. It's not overly complicated, but it was one of those rules that we were constantly always just like, a bit like,
wait, which one is
this? Is this thing? Is that thing? And this is one of those rules that you can't really afford to get wrong, because if you do, you're just changing the nature of the game in terms of the fight and the outcome of it. So it was just nice to have it available whilst we were playing, instead of having to flick to like the specific page in the book to get it.
Yes, exactly.
So I think these are just nice little reference sheets to have available to you to help you just ease through some of the harder bits or things that you can't remember so well through the game. Giant game, giant space taker.
Yes. It really is. It truly is.
Tip Number 3. One of the things that I found most annoying with this game was the setup and teardown of the map tile system. You're on the Argo and you're traveling around. That's awesome. It's very cool. The map is beautiful. Great job. However, once you've gotten to a point and you eventually will fight a primordial, you'll tear down the map, put it aside, and then you'll fight the primordial. Once you've done that, then you'll reset the map back up. Now, this is all good and fine when it's early in the game, when you've only just explored just a little bit of the map. But when you start to have explored a lot of the map, the setup of this is so much more complicated. It's so much more tricky to make sure that all the map sections is laid out properly.
It's a tile-based map. You have to, once you finish the adventure phase, find a system to take all of those cards, put them back into a pile, so that when you go to the next adventure phase, you can put it back out and basically recreate where you were on the map. And so it's not necessarily an easy thing to keep track of because, the map keeps growing and gets to be around the size of the regular game board, so it's quite large. And there may be holes in places that you haven't gone to yet. Yeah. And so I think you had a system where you were going like spiraling kind of inward or something like that, so you knew how to recreate it.
Originally I started with just following every single step that the Argo took. Mm-hmm. But eventually the map got so big that I actually had to do it in rows. Mm-hmm. And I had to go in a row format. But even that was tricky because there were gaps in places and I had to remember where the gaps were. And I couldn't always do that. And I was like, where is this one tile go? Yeah. Eventually you figure it out because you kind of remember. But there was a lot, and the map is big. So it's a bit like, it's a burden of a thing to deal with.
It takes time. Yeah. And you just kind of want to get into it and play.
You want it to be streamlined and simple. And the streamlined, simple part is to have it set up permanently. So one of the things that we found, which is very useful, is to have either a large piece of cardboard or a piece of wood, something that is firm and just tough.
Yeah, or like poster board, something that's not flimsy.
And it's about the same size. It should be bigger than by a little bit, but it can be exactly the same size, but it shouldn't be any smaller than the current board of the game. And if you can do that, and you've got something like that, then you can set up the map tile permanently. And all you then have to do is set it up, put the map out because it's already there, and then you put it aside somewhere in which that it won't hopefully get knocked over.
Tip number 4 is Kaan's box organization, which is a mystery to me because Kaan usually just handles this.
One of the things I've seen is people's difficulty in handling the insert of this game and how to organize all the cards. And there are so many cards, and that's a tricky situation. And so every person's really up to trying to find out a way in which that they can organize it that makes sense to them. And partly because I've played quite a few campaign games, big ones, that require that kind of level of like, ooh, how do I store all of these things? How do I put things back in a way in which that I'll always remember? And so I have a system in play in which that I have gotten just the core insert to function very well for me in terms of how I'm able to get anything out of the box, put it back into the box, and kind of always know where it should be.
All right, so we are going to show you guys that right now.
Here we are with the box. I'm just going to show you it from practically when I've opened the box and how I will take things out and show you what all the different components or different sections are of this board game, but partly showing you how I organize all of those things. Okay, so let's just jump into that department. Well, firstly, we take all of these sheets. This will be the story cards and the Titan sheets and things like that. And we'll just take them and put them aside. We do not need that for this. Partly because we've got this at a slight angle, things are a little crooked, as you can see. Normally it'd be a bit like that. Hopefully it's not a problem. Okay, because there's a lot of different things, I'm gonna pull some of the main components out and then I'm gonna kind of start and go in a bit of a circle. We got our Triskelions, pull these things out, and then all the tokens and various stuff like that. And all of these are bagged in their individual sets. All the different dice, all the various different types of tokens that are out there. The story tokens and the progress tokens. And I actually keep a small little bag of the most important tokens that I'm using all the time. So I have some progress, some doom tokens, some break tokens, and opening tokens, as well as the priority marker and the lost city marker. So I kind of keep that in a bag just so this is the bag I always will pull out and set up immediately. So let's start with the rest of the stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start over here with the map tiles. This section over here is just the regular map tiles of all of the different cycles. You won't ever be utilizing these particular ones, so you can just leave them aside. But I've got the tutorial maps at the very back end of here. And then I have like cycle 3, and I would normally have cycle 2 here, but we finished cycle 1, so I've got cycle 2 here. And cycle 2, or the cycle that you're currently operating, will be all here. One of the things I like to do is any map tile that you have access to that you've already gone to, you'll flip it the other way. So effectively, if I look back on my old map tile, as this will be the map tiles that I haven't been to, and then these will be the map tiles that I have been to, kind of thing. So I always know that I've got 2 piles, one pile where I've already been to, and a map tile in which that I still have to get to. So that's how that operates. Right here next to the map section, this is where I keep all of the items that I have access to. So I either already made them, found them, various things, but I'm not currently utilizing them on a Titan at the moment. So this is my card set for just seeing if I want to use them or not. And over here, right next to it, is where I keep the current Argonaut's actual cards and item and equipment cards all connected to each other. So Odyssey 0, or its items that we keep currently utilizing, stays here. And again, for each character will have their set of cards that they work with. And I keep those in order. So I just put them together and I slot them there, makes it for an easy, setup and tear down of the cards that they've currently got. And then this set of cards here, which I've already spoken about, are ones that I could use and swap out depending. So that's how I operate that. Next set of cards is over here. Now, one of them is a secret deck, which you only gain access to when you're called upon. And the other set of cards, I have 3 sets of cards here, are all of the technology cards, the nymphs, and the god form cards that you will have access to. So I keep those all over here as well. These big cards here are going to be the Argo ability cards plus the Fate or the Nemos cards that we have access to or that are currently on a Argonaut. And I keep those over here next to each other. One place, which I haven't quite found the best location for yet, are Nemos cards, that you've gone through the entire story. And normally you have to get rid of them somewhere, but there's no place in this section to actually remove them from the game or, cleanly aside. So I actually slot them here, partly as a divider between these cards that I have access to and the secret deck. So because they're the same size, putting something in between it just means that I can easily distinguish or differentiate what they are. And that works out pretty well for me. We come to here, we have all of the terrain tiles. Now I have all the terrain tiles set up quite straightforward, really. It's a bit like Tetris, truly the game in Tetris form because they're Tetris shapes. I have the little zigzagger ones here, just standing straight up. I've got the 4 extra long ones next to it. We have the small square ones, we have the really big square ones here, and we have like the little L-shaped ones, and then the straight ones, but the shorter straight ones all fit right there. So I've got a good amount of space to be able to put all the tokens and fill them up, and so it takes up this entire space just fine. But this is probably not this is not the big problem. The 2 big problems of the game are probably here and majorly here. And I'll get to this one at the very end. A way that I organize these particular set of cards, let me show you. So firstly, I separate each of the primordials by their cycles. So cycle 1's here, cycle 2 is here, and cycle 3 is here. And then this section here is all the technology cards of the cycles that I'm not currently in. Okay, so that's the 4 main piles. However, there are additional set of cards that you need to be aware of. We also have 2 adversary decks. And now the adversary deck is, I would think, the one that you're currently dealing with, you apply to the same pile in which the current cycle that you're operating. So if you were in cycle 1 and you're dealing with this particular adversary, you'd put it here. So you'd have all of those cards in that one section. The other one can go on any other pile in which that you're not operating. So you can go and put it in, say, cycle 3, something that I'm not currently utilizing. However, we also have more cards. Bree, how do you pronounce it?
Moiros?
We have the Moiros cards and we have the Kratos cards that you'll be pulling from. I like to keep these things sort of separate from everything else. And then I also have technology cards, which I haven't actually developed yet. One of the things you have to be careful with when it comes to your technology cards is that you do not want to get them mixed up with the technology cards from the other cycles. And you also don't want to get them mixed up with the cards that you've already acquired in terms of the technology set that you've got. So sometimes I put them in between, just so I know that when I put them here, that they don't get confused. The last pile of cards are the technology cards that you actually have access to, that you have gained and acquired through your playthrough, and I will put them aside over here. So I can keep all things separated, and it's easy for me to navigate all of those different card sets. Let's get to the section which probably people have the hardest time dealing with, which is this section right here. If you have this sleeved, this wouldn't fit. I don't sleeve these things. I do like to sleeve, but I'm not sleeving this. Too many cards. I'm going to start with the very top row section here and give you hopefully some tips and some tricks about how to deal with this. One of the interesting things, looking at from the side of the cards, is that you can tell that they are different from each other. So these are brown, this is red, and this is purple. That helps me immediately differentiate. One of the things I also do, though, is I separate each of these piles. So what you're looking at here is cycle 1, cycle 2, and cycle 3 item cards. And in between all of the cycles, I have them separated by these double-sided white cards of their particular cycle. So these purple bottom side ones, which are cycle 3 specific, but they're double-sided white, stand out very aggressively from all the other cards, especially the red ones and these other purple ones, giving me a perfect divider. It means that I can immediately spot and see that this is a cycle 3 card, but separating it from the main item set. Again, if I utilize that on the red cards here for cycle 2, I also have these white double-sided cards, which are separating it from the cycle 1 cards, the brown ones. And so immediately, again, I can spot which cards I don't have access to. So I pretty much know when I'm playing the game that I have access to just these cards. And then these cards I'll leave alone. And so if I'm ever going to go hunting for items, then this is where I'm hunting. And I know that because I can immediately see that all the items are in the top row of this organized section. But here is the next part. So I utilize the same trick with these sort of dividers in order for me with these cards so I can determine how to best finagle this game. All these cards right up until this point here are secret decks. And because that, I never really go to this section unless I'm asked by the game itself. So that's a kind of straightforward place for it. I then have also divided all of these sections by their cycles. So there are some darker cards and there are some blue cards here, and this is going to be cycle 3. And if I go to this section and this section, it's going to be cycle 2. And then over here, you can kind of see that there are like little delineations between them in terms of their color. And I can kind of spot that this is cycle 2 cards, and I can see that these are cycle 1 cards. But the cards that I'm currently have access to, or the ones that are specific to the battle scene, everything starts here. These white cards with the yellow sides are the condition cards. And so I practically just make sure that every time that what I'll do in the game is I'll take out the box, get all the things out, and I will take up this entire pile on my left, but your right. So I'll have these condition cards, which will be set up on the battle board, which will be here. I then have all of the Obel and Major Trauma and all the trauma cards here as well. And then I'll have the Exploration cards deck, which I currently have utilizing in the game. And I will apply all of those things over here. And so I know that all of these cards to this point are current use of my game. This is the major divider. And then these cards here, I only ever have to go to and if the game asks me to go to here. So if it says, hey, pull out some Exploration 1 cards, I know that they're right here. And because that's the cycle I'm in, or was the cycle I was in, I only ever have to be here. I never have to deal with this pile set, unless, again, it asks me to go to cycle, unless it goes for the secret decks. And that's pretty much it. That's how I kind of control all of the major things. There is two other piles that I do work with. These are the additional Obol cards, because occasionally they can get added into the game at a moment's notice. And so I have this little pile here, which just means I can gain access to them pretty quickly. I also have, this is also where I keep the other Argonauts that are not currently in use, and all of the strain cards. If the game asks me to pull a particular strain out or type of Dreamwalker, I know where to look. So everything sits right here. This pile here is mostly terrain, the double wounds, because eventually in the game, I'll just pull the entire terrain thing, put it aside. The double wounds will be utilized if I'm critting on the primordials. And then the Fated Nemos and the Nemos cards are all just stacked here. And then the secret deck at the bottom. The envelopes are the secret envelopes to be only be opened if the game asks you to open them. And that's it, really.
And then we just had a little bonus tip for you guys. If you can, find ways to split up the responsibilities and keep it so that everybody knows what their role is and what they'll be handling during the game. That can definitely make your life easier because everybody, you get into a flow, you know what you're doing every time. For example, the battles, I usually managed all of the player and Titan mats, taking a look at all of the gear, figuring out what abilities we had at our disposal.
Triskelions and things.
Handling the Triskelions. And then Kaan was usually handling the Primordial.
That's right. AI cards, escalations, all of those types of things. If I'm reading part of the story, then Bree would have like the app on the phone and add all the resources or various elements that we would gain. Or if you're doing the exploration phase where you're doing the dishing out the cards, I would have the app prepared for that. And so we're constantly juggling multiple things at the same time so that we're able to smoothen the game, make it go quicker, and just keep all the record keeping. Not that you have to do it, but where you don't go, I read all the things, now I do all the stuff, then I go back to the thing. You can quicken all of the little steps in between.
Yeah, and then you just get used to what your task is. You get better. Like if we had to switch, which we tried to do one night, where I was handling. We tried one game where I was handling the primordials. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I think we actually just gave up on that. Makes it easier, makes it move more quickly, which is nice when it's like a big immersive story like this.
Because in a game like this, you're inevitably going to come across little issues. You're like, ooh, what's that?
Just little questions.
Questions that appear and you're like, I don't know quite what the answer is. You got to find it. And so having an extra person around is just, I think, useful, especially someone who's invested in playing the game, who wants to, see it all through.
And if they're not, don't play with them.
That's true. That's true. Obviously, I think this game is very soloable, but it is a big game. It takes a lot, and there's a lot to manage. And I think you need to be in a headspace to handle that. And having just two people just means that you don't have to be so meticulous with it when you got another person who is also being helpful in the process.
Yeah, and if you do play it solo, it's definitely doable as well. It's probably going to take you a little bit longer.
So hopefully some of those tips were helpful in you having a better, more immersive time in your game.
Yes, and if anybody watching has found other tips helpful or other ways of playing the game, please let us know, because we do have 2 more cycles to go. Let everybody else know in the comments if you guys have anything.
But with that being said and done, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And until the next time.
Welcome to Wrath of Minis. I'm Brianna. Hello and welcome to Wrath of Minis. Today we've got
What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about... And I don't know anymore. My mind has become blank. So.
Much of like most of the time.
Rubbing your minotaur, of course.
Minotaur. Rubbing at your minotaur. Okay. Get it together.
You get it together.
I'm totally together.
Never.
I'm like... stuck clay.
It's weirdly specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it stuck clay is pretty together.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really sound like you, but
Minotaur.